So I think we all know now that for sure the JD Vance killed the Pope.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
yeah. I mean, there's some question of how. For me, there's a how, a why, and a who. So like,
I think
there's
we all know the answer.
well, okay. I think I like a lot of people have been talking about like delivering some kind of pathogen, some kind of just like he just got this very old man more sick, very similar to when Liz Truss killed the Queen.
Yeah,
We all know Liz Truss killed the Queen.
I think it's quite obvious that like JD Vance's vibes killed the Pope, right? Like just his vibes. Because he's got the worst vibes, hasn't he? And like some could say that vibes are pathogen like.
That's why the Night Mother chose him for this mission. I believe.
He's an expert really in alchemy
and he
within
was
his
like,
own body.
Hail Sithis. That's what he said to the Pope.
Yeah.
Then he spammed him with the Wobberjack.
I kind of think he just looked at I kind of think it was just prolonged eye contact. Like I don't have the best record with maintaining eye contact, but like if JD Vance looked at you really intensely for like 5, maybe 10 seconds, it could do it. Like he's got the creepiest fucking eyes.
Yeah, I would probably. Yeah, there's probably something inside all of us that is like, I don't know. Like in Dune when what's his name, Duke Atreides, he's got the tooth that's got gas in it or whatever. Every one of us has one of those. We just don't know it. But if JD Vance looks at you for long enough. That's true, yeah. But yeah, if JD Vance looks at you for long enough, you just go and the gas goes inside
like
you.
the little the Logan's Run hand thing or whatever. And when you hit a certain age, it goes off.
I think it's only going to be good for the whole world if we recognize JD Vance as a form of biological weaponry and prohibit him from traveling to other nations. I saw some people already warning, like, President Xi, do not meet with this man. He is a vector.
Maybe he's the guy. You see the Chinese report about they're thinking that they've traced COVID's origin to America now. Like China has, like, hey, it could be. I'm not just saying,
it's the tweet about like you think raw milk sounds like maybe a cool idea, and then you see a cow up close and you remember why we have pasteurization. I'm like, maybe RFK's got them all on raw milk. Anyway, we'll find out today here on Red Planet. How we all doing? It's a good week. As Zizek said, I'll probably bring this back up. Zizek said this week, the Pope is dead. The Antichrist is alive and kicking. So we usually start by asking our little Antichrists, Mule, what was the most base thing you did this week?
The most base thing that I did this week is probably going to sound a little bizarre to some people, but lo and behold, the world of politics and activism and organizing is bizarre. And sometimes things happen that you have absolutely no control over, like, for example, an entire committee kind of just like not really understand why it is that what they're doing is pretty bad and pretty wrong. And, if you have very little influence over how that is being done or what is happening, it makes complete sense to stand down. I basically resigned as chair from GMTU because I completely disagree with the direction that committee is going at the moment, and I have absolutely no influence over it whatsoever. And I won't go into the reasoning that I think that is because it is extremely frustrating and upsetting and
confidential,
it's confidential information as well. So obviously that's that. But hey, guess what happened within 45 minutes of doing this? And this might sound like conjecture, but within about 45 minutes of doing this, a headache that I've had for about 2 years started to just go away. That's kind of like this overwhelming stress and fatigue. I don't know. People on the show might sort of go, "That's weird." Mule seems to have lost sort of 2 years of his life, but he seems to have gone back in time with his energy and
You're looking as babyface as the vice president right now.
this is God, I don't want to look like that. But I'm feeling positively. Podcast listeners, listen, you'll be able to hear the chipper sound in my voice. I think that I've been basically burnt out for a long time, and I think that it's kind of one of these things that happens when you're trying to work for a living and also run an organization. You've got so many things to do, you don't realize just the effect that stress is having on your body. And I think it was getting to me, and I think it was a really, really good thing that I resigned, because now I feel fucking amazing and I can't wait to basically recharge over the summer and get ready to fight the oncoming wave of fascism that is definitely coming our way in the UK.
I've been privy to Mule's burnout and seeing him bouncing back at the moment, and I just want to say, we often talk about burnout as a really individualistic thing, as if it's just self-care that you need. So listeners, please bear in mind that you can be right for an org, and sometimes an org cannot be right for you because it's not doing good things for you're not well with how much you're doing for it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's that. And I think that I tried to say this quite a lot when I was chair of GMTU, to particularly to people who were doing too much work, and were actually complaining actively to me about how much work they were doing. I would say, actually there's a lot of stuff that you don't need to do. And you can make yourself sort of really unwell if you burn out and you're doing too much work. So, you're actually far more useful to the revolution if you are better and well. And that's it. And you can do that, and that's good. So do that. Tim, let's move on to you.
Yeah. For this week, didn't get up to too much aside from there was the the launch kind of event explanation thing for thing I've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, the the Pink Hoods kind of community warden initiative sort of thing, that officially kind of launched on Tuesday night, which was quite cool. Yeah, kind of awesome. It was just there's a local church just off K Road that is hosts a lot of events like that, and a lot of local organizers and Greens politicians and stuff there to talk about the idea. And it's just kind of, it's like a community warden kind of thing, nothing too crazy, but it's just in a response to the area. They recently did this trial of having way more police just roaming the area throughout the day for no good reason, and so it's kind of a response to that, being we don't actually need them. There's other people from within this community that we can we can handle the area and respond with we can respond in an appropriate manner that doesn't necessarily have to involve cuffing anyone and chucking them in the back of the van or anything like that. So so that was cool. But yeah, aside from that, just been working. What about you, Soph? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I've actually been involved with. I've got two things to talk about. One is I've not been directly involved with so much yet. I've been talking for ages about assemblies as an organizing model. I've been writing about it. I've got more writing coming up about it in a couple of different videos actually. And things are starting to happen, but I'm just gonna keep it super brief talking about it for now, because it'll be easier to talk about it maybe as a reflective thing later on. But I'm involved in writing a proposal at the moment for a thing. Hopefully we'll see. But I've also had a lot more energy for writing, most of it coming from anger. not necessarily angry writing, but like just that's where the energy is coming from recently. So I've been putting out a lot of stuff on Substack. I'm going to mention something in the news to do with that. But I think the most base thing I did this week was actually drop in on the Dawn Chorus, which I don't know if people have heard of this. But it is an event where starting with dawn in the UK, because that's where the Greenwich timeline is, they stream sounds of the dawn from the UK, and then when the sun is up there, they change over to the next time zone going west, and then like just go around 24 hours around the whole of the world. And yeah, we went to a sound camp where they were taking part. Like there are a bunch of these all around the world, and we went to our local one and like hung out with people who are mixing the stream and did some like it was in an ecological park, so it was like very in touch with nature. I think that yeah, I mean it was a really like kind of profound experience, and I really enjoyed it. I would recommend people tune in or go to local sound camps. I know there were some in New Zealand, for example. I also had like a bunch across the whole of the States. If you get the opportunity in future, I really like when ecological ceremony stuff doesn't try it like is not like white people appropriating a bunch of indigenous culture, but finds its own spirituality and its own connection to something bigger than ourselves. That like if there were anything that were present in indigenous culture, it's either like convergently invented or it's like people have seen something and taken, you know, an idea or a practice and explicitly discuss it as a thing that's like separate from it. I'm not saying there was anything that was kind of taken from indigenous culture and stuff that I saw there, but I'm just talking about the style of ecological ceremony and events that I really like is when there's just like we can see clear-eyed our own connection that gives us something meaningful in here about like our connection to the world and to nature. And like, yeah, it was just really special. And I really recommend it.
Cool.
And we did some like phytographs as well, which is where like you soak bits of plant in activator fluid and then put it onto photo paper, and then you make like little photos of the plants. That's like really fun. Yeah. So now I'm going to tell you all about a based viewer. So anonymous Conrad says the base thing but then that's crossed out and says we've been doing nice for the last several years is organizing and building an urban food growing cooperative. After doing the usual charity work for a while, a bunch of us talked about how we're still using the money we get from working jobs in capitalism to buy food and give to people harmed by capitalism. And we started asking, well, what if we just grew the food ourselves? So about 5 of us looked into how co-ops work and the local laws and regulations and got access to a garden in a friend's backyard. That was 3 years ago. Last year, we harvested enough vegetables to serve nearly 300 salads. And this year, we've nearly tripled our total garden spaces and grown to over 20 members. We've written a constitution declaring our organization's values as anti-colonial, anti-capitalist, and focused on food sovereignty and solidarity economics, and have already built connections with other local food growing orgs. We've run teaching sessions on planting, growing, harvesting, and preserving, donated to many of the local seed libraries, and plan to connect with people in the food supply chain to catch and distribute food waste, help in the fight for local undocumented migrant farm laborers / slaves, as well as maybe even growing big enough to start a proper farm. We've really come so far in such a short amount of time, and I can't wait to see what we can do next. So that's a really fucking cool one. I love I just love the writing stuff from our based viewers. It always makes me feel really proud. And like sometimes it's stuff like, I mean, I'll say this, often it's stuff like this. Do we remember like the trans woman in Syria who started a DIY network, like all this stuff? Our viewers are fucking incredible. And that's why we want to know what based things you've been doing. You can message us all on social media, or you send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if that's cool with you, and we may shout it out in a later episode. Right. That is our based stuff.
To Time to get on some not based stuff.
There is going to be some bad news.
No, there is based stuff in here. Yeah,
Tim's leading us in with a roundup of May Day because obviously May Day happened this week, and today is the 4th of May, which is the everyone knows this, the anniversary of the Haymarket bombings, where anarchists threw a bunch of bombs at police in America.
I was going to say the Star Wars Day.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I'm glad no one said that.
But Tim, tell us what has been going on this week around May Day.
Well, so yeah, this week saw International Workers' Day or Labor Day or May Day, as however you want to call it, on May 1st, a date usually marked with large organized labor demonstrations around the world. In recent years, May Day demonstrations have been growing larger and more likely to clash with police as organized labor has grown stronger worldwide. In France, tensions have been high for some time. Last year, the country elected a socialist coalition with a strong majority, but neoliberal bastard man Emmanuel Macron repeatedly rat-fucked them out of actual leftist leadership, leading to anger and more militant organizing in the French left. Last week saw 21 suspects arrested in connection to a string of arson and other attacks on French prisons, which has publicly embarrassed the French Justice Department. The results on May Day this year were relatively minor clashes between police and militant socialists, including a member of parliament, Jérôme Guedj. Thousands attended the May Day rally in Paris and across the country. I'm always just so impressed by the French protesters desire to set things on fire. And when there's nothing else to set on fire, they set themselves on fire. It's crazy.
Yeah, when Jay was driving us on the first trip to the ZAD, I remember saying to them wow, it's so cool how French people set everything on fire. They were like, yeah, but diversity of tactics.
yeah, it's guys, we got to try something else. Meanwhile, in Greece, multiple unions staged a rally outside parliament joined by anti-fascists, left-wing activists, and students. Public transport was also shut down by a nationwide strike. Although some activists showed up ready for very spiky action or possibly a riot, conflict with the police was minimal. In London, several events were held to mark May Day, including a standard A to B march and inter-organisation socials on the day. And this weekend, Jeremy Corbyn and other leftist public figures spoke at the Revolution May Day Weekender at SOAS University.
Brief interjection here. SOAS stands for the School of Oriental and African Studies, and is and is one of the most woke universities in London.
Yeah, because I feel with a name like that, it could go either way. Really.
Exactly, they had to reckon with it. They had to be oh no, what are we doing here? And now it's one of the campuses where just there's a general green miasma as you walk through. Dank in here.
All right, that's interesting. So, one of the largest outbreaks of police violence this May Day was in Brussels, where 5,000 protesters led a march against the Belgian capital under the name "In the Face of Fascism." Police, playing their part perfectly in response to this accusation, gradually increased in presence and hostility until conflict became outright violent, ending in a police kettle of the protesters. US President Donald Trump has appeared as a common motif across May Day protests inside and outside of America, with Italian trade unionists and anti-fascists parading puppets of Trump and Italian fascist Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Protests in the Philippines constructed a multi-faced effigy of Trump and Filipino President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos, which they proceeded to beat with hammers. All power to all people. Solidarity from Red Planet with the workers of the world. So what's happening in Sophie, you could tell us a little bit about the attacks on the freedoms of trans people by the ruling class in the US and UK.
Yeah, sure. So if people haven't seen this stuff, the main focus of last week's episode was talking about what's happening in the UK with trans people and how we can approach community organizing to combat it or reduce harm for people in our community. But this week there has been stuff by RFK's Department of Health and Human Services, I think is what HHS stands for, where he's released guidance saying that trans kids should not be given any kind of, just any kind of transition healthcare whatsoever, and basically pushing for conversion therapy. The headlines are just saying therapy, but it's conversion therapy if you're saying, therapy to make you not trans, right? It's pretty horrific. This is the same guy who's also saying we should like create a registry of autistic people. It's pretty dire. But the good news is the W path and US path, which are the W path is the like world body for trans healthcare. It's like the WHO but for trans healthcare specifically, and the US path is the US like division. Have immediately responded to tell RFK to get fucked. They just put out a statement saying that trans kids need like medicine and care that's based on science, not on just bullshit made up by a guy with worms in his brain. It's heartening to see this. I guess it's interesting to see it as a trans woman in the UK, where our establishment is so completely seized by transphobia. Like it's really like an intense, obsessive hatred they have with us. Whereas in the US, there is such a division where some parts of the establishment have rotted into this like evangelical crusade to destroy everything woke and all the black people and all the immigrants and all the transgender people. But still another part of the establishment is still like actually fighting for for trans people. That's bizarre. Meanwhile, in the UK, the British Transport Police responded to the stuff we were discussing last week that the Supreme Court and the government have been doing by saying that trans women will be searched by male officers, will be strip searched by male officers, which means that the British Transport Police has given male officers free license to strip search any woman anytime, because they can just say that they thought she was trans, right? And that if she said she wasn't, she was lying. Obviously trans women are going to be the most directly affected, or rather are the most directly targeted, but this does just make all women less safe. Like if people don't remember Wayne Couzens, the Met police officer who raped and murdered Sarah Everard and then burned her body, like the police are a danger to women, and this ruling has directly given power into their hands against women. Just unhinged. Barclays, known Zionist bank, Barclays, who have responded to every like BDS call and everything, saying just like stop supporting genocide with proud support of Israel, were like the biggest, fastest company to announce they're banning trans women from using the women's bathroom. I'm not banking with Barclays anyway, but it's good to know that the only place to piss is in their faces. If I did find myself in a Barclays bank. As I say, yeah, things feel a lot more like the ruling class's attitudes toward trans people in the UK feels a lot more unifiedly grim than in the US, where it's divided like this. Though we will see how things shake out. A lot of people right now are very scared about an amendment to something called the data bill that's coming through. All the bills coming through government just suck shit in one way or another and have like really misleading names. Like, for example, the online safety bill a while ago had a bunch of implications for like shutting down left-wing journalism. But the data bill, there has been an amendment proposed by a Tory minister who wants to basically reverse the Gender Recognition Act, which is giving trans people the right to privacy and non-discrimination by forcibly outing them by recording all instances where gender doesn't match sex at birth. In the worst case, this could lead to a revoking of correctly gendered passports for trans people and other documents, and it could also lead to a national trans registry, because it would be very easy to collect up the data of everyone who had their documents one way who have been changed back by this bill. But Nadia Whittome, like the only progressive in Labour, has said the government is going to vote this amendment down. I don't know if we can trust that, because it's a Labour MP saying it. So that was nice, Nadia. Thanks. We'll see, I guess. Mule, why don't you tell us some more about Labour?
Yeah, so Labour have absolutely shat the pants at the UK local elections, with fascists making huge wins. Keir Starmer's Labour has suffered a historic defeat at the UK local elections with a staggering loss of Labour councillors, more than the loss of councillors that happened before Labour's last historic defeat in the 70s. In response to this, Keir Starmer said on Twitter, quote, "My response is simple. I get it. We're moving in the right direction, but people must feel the benefits of change. I will go further and faster to make this happen." Also, when asked, quote, "It sounds like you're about to drive off a cliff and your answer is put your foot down on the accelerator and don't change direction," end quote, by Trevor Phillips on Sky News' election recap show, evil cunt Wes Streeting responded by saying, quote, "No, we've got to go harder and faster. On deportations, we've got deportations up," end quote. As Labour constantly turns the racism dial while looking back at the audience who constantly accuse them of being woke leftist Marxists despite being the most right-wing government in recent years, it appears their strategy remains holding off reform by throwing cookies at a sort of horrifying fascist gammon cookie monster thing. As reform have made massive gains across the country and the rights of trans people and migrants appear to be more and more at risk, we must prepare for easily the darkest days of Britain since the 80s. And that's all there is really to say about this. Tim, why don't you tell us about the peace camp?
Yeah. So, Action closes 2-week peace camp near base for US nuclear bombers. Activists blockaded the Lakenheath military base to oppose potential nuclear warhead storage, wrapping up a 2-week peace camp with conferences, gigs, and symbolic protests, including a topless FINT blockade focusing on war's gendered impact. The protest, organized by Lakenheath Alliance for Peace, had an Extinction Rebellion vibe, featuring red rebels and banners from UK peace groups. Police eventually moved in, arresting 7 for obstruction. Though technically an RAF base, Lakenheath hosts the US Air Force's 48th Fighter Wing. Nuclear weapons were last confirmed here in 2008, but new storage facilities suggest their possible return. Protesters linked militarism to climate harm, nuclear risks, and misplaced funding priorities, e.g. weapons over schools and nurses, stressing the human and environmental costs. Amid the vigil, the contrast of dawn birdsong against the base's barbed wire reminded one activist why resisting militarism, even in small ways, matters. There's a quote from, largely quotes from Anarchist Federation. But yeah, pretty interesting little story there, especially the idea of returning, the nuclear storage returning. I feel like it's kind of something that literally anyone should be worried about, that for many reasons, like not just like, oh, there's going to be like nuclear materials stored in my area, like where it's near me or whatever like that. But it's also like, oh, is this in preparation for expanded militarization, like in the future, anything like that? Or even just like, oh, does this mean that we become a military target because, now we have an airbase that has gone from, not very used to now being a nuclear site, all that kind of things like that. So plenty of reasons why a lot of people are not happy about that. But yeah, why don't we what's been happening with Just Stop Oil? So
there was a piece. Well, so basically what has happened with them is that Just Stop Oil has announced they're no longer going to be doing actions. There was a piece in the BBC about this that said Just Stop Oil policed to extinction. And I don't know, it's complicated. So I've written a Substack article about it. I'm going to go through the notes here and then talk about it briefly. So Just Stop Oil is ending its campaigning after 3 years, citing victory because the government has committed to no new oil or gas licenses. This seems like a bizarre thing to do, right? Because when your name is Just Stop Oil, like saying, well, we technically have stopped them from making new oil and gas licenses is like, seems like a cheap kind of way to declare victory. But the point of this piece is that like it's because of stricter policing. Privately admitting tough new protest laws made operations impossible. Their last event was a joyful celebration, not a blockade. So they had the ceremony where they said they were hanging up the high vis. Basically, they like took off their iconic orange high-vis jackets. Underneath, though, they had t-shirts with a question mark under where the Just Stop Oil logo was, to kind of symbolize like what comes next. Which I think what comes next lines up very much with the thesis of our show, which is just like, as you know, policing will drive more as policing goes more authoritarian, and there are harsher punishments for people doing peaceful stuff like throwing powder paint on the snooker, then people will turn to more direct acts of sabotage. Just Stop Oil became one of the UK's most disliked groups due to roadblocks, art attacks, and glue protests. New laws, like the 2022 Public Order Act, criminalized disruption, leading to harsher penalties and killing their tactics. Whilst public support for climate action remains high, Just Stop Oil's alienation of voters has sparked debate. Some former JSO activists are pivoting to legal tactics. For example, there is something called the Citizens Arrest Network, which basically goes to do citizens arrests. They haven't massively succeeded doing these, but the one guy they did get, they did a citizen's arrest on the CFO of Thames Water for public nuisance because he is in charge of a company that's polluting a bunch of water bodies, right? And he resigned within several days of them doing a citizen's arrest on him. So like, I feel like that is a very successful tactic to like get people fucking scared because they got you, like, right?
Post Luigi, shit like that has
exactly.
like a lot more of impact, you know, because now it's like, oh, like these people found you and did a citizen's arrest. Like, okay, well, it would have been like easier for someone, you know, for them. Like if a group of people can go up to you and do that, some, you know, random person could just walk up and boom, you know.
Well, not in the UK. He would have to beat them with hammers like that Trump bong bong effigy.
Yeah. I mean, you know, or a knife or something like that. There's like plenty of reasons to be scared, you know.
Yeah. Anyway, so some groups are doing things that are legal to do but are more direct. And other groups, there's been warning from some that there is going to be underground radicalism emerging. This again was the framing of the BBC article. The BBC article, I think, is, to put it mildly, I don't think they're on the climate protesters' side. But yes, there has been like groups emerge dedicated to direct sabotage. Most notoriously, Shut the System is one we're going to be keeping an eye on the show. Have taken on essentially the Palestine action model of just going directly to the supply chain of people doing harm to the environment and just breaking their shit. Critics, even within the Green Movement, say Just Stop Oil's disruption drowned its message. Supporters argue it forced climate urgency into headlines. Polls show only 70% of the public viewed Just Stop Oil favorably. Peaceful mass protests like Restore Nature Now struggle for attention, while experts predict new, possibly more chaotic tactics. The movement now focuses on broader public engagement, but Just Stop Oil's co-founder warns nobody is shutting up shop. The piece I've written about this, I basically am looking at, there was an Instagram reel put out by Just Stop Oil, and I know that sounds a bit silly, but it was this video where they were saying, where they showed a clip of someone who was being challenged, a Just Stop Oil guy who was being challenged, like, is this a way to get people on board? And he said, this is a way to get people to join other organizations, not this one. And the next shot showed results, like an excerpt saying results in a study showed that orgs that deploy unpopular tactics drive people to drive recruitment in the general population to other orgs in the same movement, not their one. This is a very interesting claim, right? So Just Stop Oil is basically in this video saying, we were always clowning. Like we were always just doing an annoying attention grabbing thing that we knew would piss people off, but it would get people to join other orgs. I personally believe this. I just, like, from what I've seen of Just Stop Oil, I personally do think they were doing this very much on purpose. And I also would argue we have seen people adopt the same clowning strategy of unpopular tactics with regards to Palestine, making the analogy between Just Stop Oil and Shut the System and those groups and Palestine action a one-to-one analogy. But we can't know, right? Like it could just be a cope where Just Stop Oil is posting this being like, yeah, we were just doing a thing the whole time. The fact everyone hates us is because, but I don't think that is true, because like, why should they care? If an org has that bad reputation, right? Like they could have stopped doing what they were doing ages ago, and if it was because of policing, they could have stopped what they were doing ages ago. Like the Public Order Act was in 2022. It's been 3 years. I I do think it has to do with policing, and I do think that they are like concerned about people getting put away for a long time for just doing this peaceful actions, like I say, throwing orange paint on the snooker. But yeah, I think it's worth us discussing and keeping in mind in future the tactic of clowning as a like a strategy that an org can deploy as part of an ecosystem of other orgs. Um, but yeah, so that's just up oil. Like I say, shut the system is one we're going to keep an eye on. In the meantime, Mule, tell us a little bit about some wildfires in Israel.
Thanks,
Well, now.
Sophie. Yeah, 65%. Israel is in panic as wildfires ravage the country, and Qassam continues to ravage the IOF. So Israel has had multiple crises over the last couple of weeks, including historic wildfires, multiple Yemeni missile strikes, more and more instances of IOF incompetency resulting in easy wins for the Qassam brigades, and a BBC-funded documentary showing just how sick and twisted Israeli settlers, particularly Daniela Weiss, are. The wildfires began on Thursday this week and blazed for almost 3 days with no reported casualties or damage to buildings, but 5,000 acres of forest and farmland were burnt. The struggle Israel had in putting out the fires is indicative of their lack of preparedness in the face of climate change, with much of the money it spends going on genocide and apartheid, as it normally does. Israel relied on the aid of other Western countries to try and quell the flames, with assistance coming from Cyprus, North Macedonia, France, Ukraine, and others. Interesting to note that much of the forestland that was burned down was planted forest, as most of so-called Israel's forests are actually not indigenous. This presents a unique scenario in that these wildfires are unprecedented for this time of year and at this scale, and the so-called wildlife it's threatening, well, I guess it still counts as wildlife. The wildlife it's threatening is almost entirely planted forest and non-native species. Make of that what you will. The Qassam brigades report more and more successful operations against the IDF, despite it being the 62nd day of a total siege on Gaza. That's no aid, no food, no electricity, no medicine being allowed in, and the 575th day of the genocidal assault on Gaza. In the last week, the Qassam brigades, the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, pulled off a successful sniper ambush of IOF soldiers who had stopped their Merkava tank and for some bizarre unknown reason stood up with no cover whatsoever, with one Israeli soldier falling backwards into the turret hatch of the tank with his feet up in the air, an iconic end for a fascist. In another ambush, a tank was hit with a Yassin RPG, with the Israelis publishing their own recording of this with a cut in the video to an airstrike that happened almost 30 minutes later, somehow showing them winning this fight when the airstrike was long after the tank was destroyed and, according to the Qassam brigades, caused no casualties. These are two published successes. It is unknown at this point how many operations have been successful during the recent Israeli push into Beit Hanun in northeastern Gaza, where these ambushes occurred. Yemen has also made significant gains against the US in Israel, with Ansar Allah drones and missile strikes forcing a US aircraft carrier to evade so hard that a $67 million fighter jet fell overboard, with chances of retrieval next to none. Apparently, the pilot also had to eject out of the fighter jet and got injured on the way because it was such a drastic maneuver. What else do we have here? More recently, apparently only today, Ansar Allah had an extremely close hit on Israel's Ben Gurion airport, acting as a warning strike for Israel to cease its hostilities in Gaza. In response, Netanyahu in a rage has called on tens of thousands of reservists to service, claiming that they will expand operations in Gaza and strike the Houthis back 7 times stronger, said the new defense minister. In propaganda news, Louis Theroux's The Settlers made for an uncomfortable watch for liberal Zionists as unedited and on camera, the most rabid and evil settlers were not ashamed of saying just exactly how and why they want the Palestinians to be removed from Gaza and the West Bank. Daniela Weiss from Nachala, a settler organization who in the documentary at one point veers her Jeep off the road surrounding Gaza to try and get into the enclave, despite being ordered by the IOF not to, stated on camera that she has direct contact with Netanyahu's aides and says that, quote, "We do not force the government, we do for the government what they cannot do for themselves," end quote, claiming that Netanyahu supports the settling of the Gaza Strip, but he cannot say it. In a response to the documentary, the home of Issa Amro, a Palestinian activist who was interviewed by Louis Theroux, was raided by Israeli settlers and soldiers who threatened and assaulted the man. And soldiers detained him and his family while settlers ransacked his property. All solidarity with Palestinians massive glory to the resistance, glory to the martyrs, love from Red Planet. So there's the news for this week. Just before we get into the main topic of the show, we are going to remind you that this is a show and we need your money. Give us your money. Go to Red Planet on Patreon. That's patreon.com/red_planet. There are various different tiers there that you can choose to support us with. You can also give us a one-off donation, and you can also buy some merch if you go to mercenarycreative.com and buy one of our tote bags, hoodies, or t-shirts. There's more merch to come in the future. But let's get into the main topic of discussion of the show, which is the imperialist economic downfall, Trump tariff nightmare world that we're
Absolutely.
in. I don't know if anyone has an intro to this or a sort of like preamble.
I think when this was in the news as a headline, we had it as Trump tariffs were an earthquake, the trade war tsunami is hitting US ports. I think, like the idea, it's helpful to think about this idea as like there was an initial shock, but it's about like, it's literally about to hit. This is going to be, this is a weird episode because we are right before the storm properly hit. You could say we're in the eye of the storm. Like we're just
like I liked that about the one of these sources articles, how it says Trump's tariffs were an earthquake, the trade war tsunami is hitting the US. It's like, you know how we all know an earthquake can cause a tsunami later, and so this was like this one event that was, and it was huge, had a huge effect by itself, but then the Rammies are still coming. So we're about to start seeing more of the ramifications in the form of this
bro, they didn't think
tsunami.
of the Rammies.
They didn't. No.
So I mean, if people aren't familiar with the situation, I'm sorry, it's like who's not familiar with So President Donald Trump has enacted sweeping tariffs to the entire, like literally the entire world. There is a global tariff of 10%, and then there were like specific country tariffs of all sorts of different numbers. We reported on this previously. Some people were like, was this generated by ChatGPT? Tariffs are like not an unusual thing in global trade policy. Just to give a brief overview, like neoliberal trade wants to make itself as invisible as possible because it's all about the free market. And so like using a tariff to say, we're going to discourage trade with this country because we're politically tense with them, but we're not going to ban you from trading with them because that would be too, controlling of that's too much central planning or whatever. It is fairly normal. Like I spent some time researching this, just like looking at like what the UK's trade tariff policy stuff is like, for example. It's fairly normal, but it's not normal to just like arbitrarily throw massive tariffs onto the entire world. We've said like previously when talking about this, like if Trump were trying to pull off like self-sufficient America, isolationist America first, the stuff that he kind of says, it would require massive central planning. Like it would require like viewing it as an intergenerational project of like funding, training people to work in industry to produce stuff. Like North America is a huge place. the territory of the part of Turtle Island that is called the United States of America is a huge place and could be like pretty self-sufficient with planning. But it doesn't just like magically happen by shutting out the entire rest of the world. And yeah, like this, where we're at currently is that there is supposedly a 90-day pause on all tariffs except the underlying global one and the tariff on China, which they actually increased after they put this pause, but really revoked everything. And there's a lot of fear about when the tariffs come back into action, but that's not, I think that like the implosion that's just about to hit is not dependent on the tariffs coming back. I think that's an important thing to say. That like if the tariffs came back again, it would be part and parcel of the same thing at this point. Like putting out those like blocks on trade to the entire world as the world's richest economy, as the world's richest country, has just sent everyone the message that America is an unstable trading partner and that we cannot safely trade with them. And then revoking it is making it look even more unstable in an untrustworthy way. And then saying that it's a pause and it is going to come back is giving a specific deadline to the rest of the world to rearrange our trade agreements to no longer trade with America. And I don't know if you two saw like footage of American ports just being empty this week, but that shit's been like utterly crazy to see.
Well, what seems to be like, in my observations anyway, what seems to be happening is while Trump was out of office, he played Age of Empires, and he noticed in Age of Empires that when you mine your own resources, you don't have to buy them from other people. And he was like, why doesn't America do that? That's so weird. Because, there's been these like weird pushes that I've seen. I don't know if these have been like social media adverts from like different companies or whatever, but it seems too coincidental. But like literally like asking Americans if they want to join the American like mining industry and stuff like that. Like, don't have a job? Why don't you start digging in the mines, dude? Like, there's mines there. You can get in them. That's great. We won't pay you fucking anything, but you can get in there and that will be great. But it
like,
seems
as if those jobs were good because they were fun or something or romantic and not because they were unionized. Like people would rather be a barista than work in a mine for the same pay.
It's so completely bizarre. I also have like a huge conspiracy theory as to why the Minecraft movie happened, and it literally starts with Jack Black being like, as a child, I yearned for the mines. Don't watch that movie. It's so bad. Nah, you should watch it. It is funny, but it was also bad. But anyway, no, but that seems to be where he's coming from. There's been all these kind of economists. I've watched a lot of economists like Yanis Varoufakis, and some other losers that I've never heard of, sort of talk about this, and they're talking about things like, oh, America's trying to do this like isolationist thing, where like, we don't need the rest of the world, whereas it really absolutely does. And I think that we're going to see that's one of the rammies that we're going to see in like, the coming weeks or months or whatever, is that America really does need the rest of the world to operate. But it's going up against a country. I was kind of joking before that Trump has played Age of Empires and seen this thing, but really what's probably happened is he's probably had like someone go, right, your biggest opponent if you get in office is going to be China. And he said, what's so good about China? And they will have said, well, they produce all their own stuff. They literally make all their own stuff. They have mines all over the country. They have really good trade routes with like, surrounding countries and stuff. And that's how they're so productive, and they're doing a lot of stuff. And he's gone, shit, we need to do that, and we also need to like annoy and upset China and make them unstable. And so he's just done this. That's kind of my take on all of it, and he's just done it really badly.
There is almost a video game-ish logic to it, like a progression tree, where you think that if you're the Imperial power, it must be because you got like really, really good at like mining and producing all your own stuff, and then you were like powerful enough to conquer other countries and then get really, really big, but actually still ultimately they're weaker countries than you that you dominate, and your country is the most big and powerful, and but like just no examination of like how imperialist extraction actually works, that like all your wealth is coming from those countries. And like I really think we should say this too, like those some like of the smallest countries in the imperial supply chain are going to be completely devastated by this, and like worse than the like American working class is going to be hit by this. Like it will, like if your whole economy is oriented around selling stuff into the US, and now the US is a completely untrustworthy trade partner, like you can look around for other options, but it's all going to be at a lower rate. Like even if other options materialize, those options are between like other buyer countries, economies for the kind of goods that you have, and like they're not going to be as good as the US, or you would have been trading with them already. Or
well, and also
with another country that has a big supply of the same stuff, if you can't even break into that market, who will just buy your stuff at like the lowest possible rate.
Yeah, because they're trading with you with understanding the dynamic that you have lost your ability to trade, you know, with America. That's where everything's going. So, you know, like if anyone else wants to trade with you, they're not going to give you the same price. They're going to go, okay, well, I know you got a lot of stuff to offload. You're in a bad spot right now. So how about I just give you the lowest possible rate that you will accept, you know? So it's there's so many different angles that that this affects people. It's it's pretty wild. But yeah, we've talked about before about just going back a second, this like the fascist mind conceives all civilizations, or like, you know, like nations developing in Age of Empires style development tree,
yes,
you know,
absolutely.
And they go like
100%.
like we had the wheel before those guys, so we are the more advanced one. And it's like, well, that civilization, you know, didn't like they're a mountain people, they didn't need wheels, you know, like things like that. And it's interesting to see how that still like that manifests and things like this, where, you know, like there's, you know, like even all this stuff, like a little while back Trump was like calling everyone else all these like shithole countries or whatever, all these other countries, and it's like it's all connected. Like you thought you were on top up here and that everyone else like relied on you, but it's like, you know, you can't just pull the plug like that. Like like I mean, even when we look at countries that have you know, whether they've moved everything domestically or like, you know, even like through the process of like collectivization and stuff like that, it's taken like years and years and years. And, you know, like obviously there's been huge hiccups in anywhere that's ever attempted that, but it's like to the hubris of the,
it is not Red Planet
like,
official position that the casualties of the Great Leap Forward were hiccups, but
I mean, hey, you want to make an omelet, right? So
oh Jesus Christ!
Seriously, but
keep that in.
Like,
keep that in.
Yeah. But you know, it's like the hubris of like the American God Emperor nation that believes that they can do what no one else has been able to done, and they can do it overnight. And they, you know, they can probably just ask a calculator for their plan.
Well, that's another thing. They forget that the entirety of their, like, it's like we've been saying, it all comes from imperialist extraction. It also comes from slavery. Like the entire of the fucking USA is built on slavery. You know, like it just always comes back to this like complete misunderstanding that, you know, somehow like, you know, the white people who came over who owned slaves just built their own houses. It's like it doesn't fucking work like that, bro.
Yeah, I think that like I want to propose another like Trump intention going on here. And I promise I'm not doing like Trump is doing 4D chess. Like it's very much like 2D snakes and ladders at best. But like we don't believe that he believes the stuff he says about making America strong, right? Like just taking that for a second and going like, okay, he maybe he doesn't understand it at all. It seems like he doesn't understand it at all, but maybe he just doesn't mean it in the slightest. And like there's a logic here which is like better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven kind of thing, where like the American empire already was hitting decline and already its power was beginning to shrink, which has like left Trump in a room with people who are explaining stuff is bad and we need to make changes in order to basically like correct course here and improve things. And he's like, well, Trump is the archetypical 80s business guy. And when businesses that currently have a bunch of assets and money are starting to turn inward a little bit, what that guy does with them is strip mine the whole company for its assets, put it into his personal bank account and fuck off. So like I do think that like folding up the country into the pocket of like 5 billionaires and then they maybe even leave, but maybe he gets to be king for the rest of his life is his plan. But like, yeah, I don't know how much that gives us, because like this is where you come back around to how much Trump does actually understand, which is not a lot, and that like they are actually about to be hit by like just complete economic devastation. And yeah.
It's also they are going to be seeing these things. They are going to be seeing things like the entire world opinion turning against the US, the entire world opinion turning against Israel, seeing the connection of the US and Israel. Like, you know, the electoral race was absolutely like massive when it came to you know, people all over the world watching what the candidates were saying about you know, the genocide in Gaza, and you know, we're seeing like so many different examples of the US military might just failing. Like just the story that I read before, like an aircraft carrier did a turn too fast and a jet fell off. Like that's silly Billy behavior.
It was so sick. They tried to Tokyo drift it and just like, like.
You know, the Houthis actually went like, and the U.S. military went, "Oh no, my plane! It literally in the sea! Oh no!"
Literally,
it's so incredible. Like they're just, oh man. Like,
but I think like talking about U.S. military expenditure is like a, you know, that's another one, because like the U.S. military is the country's biggest, and I guess by extension like the world's biggest welfare program, and like is a public employment program for Americans that like they don't want to cut, because their huge military is a huge influence of its like that, you know, it is hard power they have. But still they are, right? They pulled out of supporting Ukraine. Like they didn't pull out of supporting Ukraine because like because Putin is a mastermind criminal blackmailer who has a PP tape or whatever. It's not this, right? It's that they didn't want to spend the money on Ukraine. So the Zizek quote I mentioned earlier is a Substack piece he put out that was called "The Pope is Dead, the Antichrist is Alive and Kicking." But the subtitle of it was like classically Zizek dramatic style, was like, a lot, perhaps everything, perhaps the fate of the whole world depends on the urgency of drawing parallel between Gaza and Ukraine. And like pointing out that like the devolution of world power into like small like regional tyrants, as in like Israel in the Middle East, Russia in Eastern Europe, America like as an isolationist power, like is a possible outcome if like Israel and Russia are not fought in, you know, in similar terms, like fought against for what they're doing in the other respective to the, you know, to those respective people. And like, yeah, I don't know. I just think it's like the US is trying to let its conflicts that it's wrapped up in resolve as fast as possible. In the case of both of them, that means like letting the weaker party and people be like exterminated and conquered and oppressed. And in like they'd rather be funding Israel than Ukraine, so they've pulled back from Israel, but they may also like pull back operations with Israel as like things continue to get worse. That could be a consequence of the economic shockwave that's about to hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also, you know, there's some irony in sending arms to Ukraine. It's in the same way that you know, so many police police units end up with just insane armaments is because these are weapons that were about to be decommissioned, and then they get sent off, they get sold to the Ukraine for cheap, and then America's like the military industrial complex is still making money off this. This is like, like when the butter factories realized they could sell margarine as a product as well, and they're just like, bam, like, like twice the money or whatever. So it's like, yeah, even, like, I don't know, there's like some absolute marks that thought that it was out of some kind of like altruistic, like we have to save, like our European allies or whatever. But it's like, it's always just been business, and it's always been and it's like, even just like sparking another actual like ground war is like so profitable. That's like the dream for any little, like, I don't know, like reptile freak man in a suit working at Lockheed Martin or whatever. But yeah, one thing that I am finding is, well, that I found quite interesting about all the tariffs and all that kind of stuff is like who was hit by what, and like the percentages of the tariffs and all this
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
of
stuff.
course, it was fascinating.
This was one of the things that they, like, this was one of the things that a lot of people were like, this was created by AI, wasn't it? Like there's all this like speculation about that, because it seemed like almost like quite random. I've seen some people try and kind of like explain it or reconcile it, or like try, and then it always comes back to these 4D chess kind of like arguments and stuff. But I don't know, it seems pretty random. One of my favorite things, though, I think we talked about this the other week, was that there's a there's a couple of small Pacific nations, so Niue and Palau, that were just completely left off the list.
Yep.
Which totally just like, like I was joking on Twitter, like, I mean, it's a good century. I just didn't think it would be Niuean, but there's like, all of these like I've seen on social media over the last couple of weeks, like I have friends that are like Niuean, or like have Niuean friends and family and stuff, and they're like, all right, we're setting up a shell company where because that kind of stuff already exists in the Pacific. Like
Yeah, for sure.
if anyone remembers the Panama Papers, John Key, our New Zealand former prime minister, was the only politician mentioned by name in the Panama Papers, and it was for setting up this kind of like tax haven out in the Cook Islands. And there's always been these little kind of things going on there, but it's just like wild, because they've just set up, like, I mean, it's kind of like they've engineered, and they're in the middle of Pacific as well. So it's, it's like halfway out between, like New Zealand, Australia, Asia, and America on the other side and stuff. So these like perfect places for just like, cooking up some kind of like hectic export scam. But then there's like other places like Fiji have always been very far up America's ass, like very, like, like very big supporters, and like all into the Trump stuff and everything like that. And they got hit with like 63% tariffs, I think it was, which is like, gigantic. And it was like kind of painful to watch their finance minister and some other government spokespeople, like I think it was like the deputy prime minister, maybe, just like literally just like almost teary-eyed on TV, being like, what did we do wrong, like what is going on? And it's kind of like, it is kind of sad to see people beg like that and plead, but also it's like, oh, you just totally fucked up that island nation that
Yeah.
relies on those imports and
Yeah,
exports.
100%.
Like, and a lot of people don't really realize, but a lot of Pacific nations have been deliberately, like, in the same way that, we all know that like Africa was underdeveloped for economic reasons, for imperialist reasons. Same thing with the Pacific. Australia, New Zealand, and and America as well, to an extent, have deliberately underdeveloped the Pacific and geared them more towards, like, instead of agriculture that grows food for domestic markets. It's cash crops for overseas, things like that. So they're like super, super dependent. A lot of these islands are super dependent on imports and exports to, and it's like you can't, like, they're both part of the same thing, like you can't be just importing food without also exporting stuff to pay for it and all that kind of stuff as
Yeah,
well.
and I
So
think we should say as well that like, when people are saying it's going to be the Chinese century now, like that doesn't mean that these same like supplier countries can turn to China, because it's like you can't just say I have like a million tons of sugar cane or whatever like thing, and I have been selling it to these American companies, so I'll just sell it to Chinese companies. It doesn't just like materialize, like they don't necessarily have the same demand.
Yeah, exactly. And there has been a lot of Chinese trade negotiations and all kinds of other, deals going on in the Pacific for a little while now, which a lot of Western media has kind of like pushed as this like, the Chinese octopus is spreading its tentacles in the Pacific and all this kind of stuff. And there've been like
Sounds
people like
fucking hot.
yeah, like
Oh my
banging the
god, I
war
wasn't
drums.
muted.
Like there has been so much talk of like, there's like a bunch of different military alliances that are like, we've got to keep China out. And it's not because they think that China is going to like invade or do anything like that. It's because it threatens the kind of economic kind of, I guess, like the racket that, is set up in the Pacific already. So I, for one, welcome our new Chinese overlords. But it's like this kind of thing where it's like, okay, well, like America and like the UK and a bunch of other nations, France and stuff, offering these really terrible deals that keep, it's like classic neo-colonialism, like keep these small nations underdeveloped, whereas then like China comes in and goes like, hey, here's like an interest-free loan to do like whatever you need to do, whatever infrastructure you need, but you just need to be a trade partner with us. And they're just like, okay, sweet.
Yeah. I mean,
like,
it's like when we talk about the IMF and their like structural adjustment policies, like it's still making a requirement of the country to the loan, but it's not saying like you like there's the direct request that they're a trade partner with China, but it's still like it's not the same as like you have to structure your whole economy around pointing to America to just like core out your country, which is like when that is the the level of control, economic control that America has exerted over the rest of the world for the last like 50 years. Like the what you're saying about like all these countries that have been sucked up to America, like I think it's really worth highlighting like what America has just done to any concept of being an ally of America. Like Israel got tariffs, right? Like there was a tariff on Israeli goods, right? There's a tariff on like Italian goods, like countries that have leaders who are doing the Trump bit. We all like when we see Giorgia Meloni and she's talking about like transgenders threatening the traditional Western family, whatever. And she's saying these are, and then she says shit like there are some bad people, and you're like, oh yeah, you're doing a Trump bit. Like it's his politics and it's his style and all this. But even though you're like trying to be another Trump, he's still putting a tariff on you. Like
exactly,
even his best conceivable friends in other countries, like
yeah. It's like, and we see that, like we see how, and this is like what we saw with like Ukraine and everything as well. It's like you are very useful for certain things, and then as soon as you're not, it's just like okay, whatever. But and I think it's also that kind of mentality of like they want to be on top, and I think that does go back to like Trump's roots as like a coked out 80s businessman, kind of shady like mob connections, all that kind of stuff. Is that like he wants to big dog everyone else, and it's like I don't think he personally had too much of a hand actually developing these, like this policy or anything like that. But he would have looked at them and he would have been like, yeah, no, cool. Yep, this is
I mean, like he loves tariffs and has talked about tariffs and like addressing the trade deficit and all this stuff for a long time. Like it's an area of interest. Like we don't have to the kind of like when liberals think that they're scoring a great victory by saying like Trump just like drools and has like oatmeal for brains. Like he doesn't understand the stuff well, but he does like know that he wants to apply tariffs to everyone. Like,
yeah. Should we go through? We got some stuff in the notes that we've kind of covered a little bit, but we've not really covered too much.
Yeah, I think talking about the import drop is really important.
Yeah.
Because like this is probably getting some facts on that is important for understanding the shockwave as it's coming in, and it's about to be. So major ports like LA report a 35% import drop. When I was talking before about like seeing footage of empty ports, like literally I saw one source say like a bunch of companies have just canceled the rest of their plans concerning America for all of 2025. Major ports like LA report a 35% import drop, meaning empty shelves by summer and mass layoffs in trucking, warehousing, and retail, all while Walmart and Amazon pass costs onto workers and consumers. Shipping routes being cancelled at pandemic level rates, hitting low wage sectors, toys, apparel hardest, while CEOs restructure to exploit cheaper labor in places like the Dominican Republic. Capital always finds a way to keep profits flowing by squeezing labor elsewhere. The only supply chain resilience capitalism cares about is resilience against worker power, obviously. Big retailers like Walmart and Amazon can afford to eat tariff costs for now, but that's the for now is basically what's holding off like the entire full like bottom dropping out of the US economy and all related economies. But smaller businesses and workers are, already starting to bear the brunt via job cuts and inflation. The recession clock is ticking. It's also worth saying like that Trump's tariffs cause a 50% cancellation rate in Chinese shipments, and that's like the most direct like US ports being empty. When we've been saying as well about like the US thinking the rest of the world is dependent on it and it'll cut things off and then the rest of the world will come begging. China is the biggest example of this, and that's part of why they've left the 145% tariff on China. And like it is, just seeing the ports empty because that's just how much stuff was being imported from China. It's shocking already.
And it's like it is wild seeing. I've been seeing on social media people posting their their shopping carts for all kinds of whatever junk from like Temu or whatever, like wherever they're getting it and stuff.
The Temu shit was so funny but also so sad.
Yeah, and seeing their like what are the it's like listed as like a some kind of like trade import tax or something like that pops up, and it's just like things inflating in value like up to like 3 times or whatever like that, and people just like being really upset that they can't get their like $13 like treats or whatever like that. And it's just like
because it was on Reddit, it was on the subreddit, like the Temu subreddit, people just being like, what the fuck, like what's changed, have I missed something? And it's like people like, really don't know what this is. And that's really fucked. And it just kind of goes to show, it kind of makes sense now as to why the entire fucking US media was just like, tariffs explained. What are Trump's new tariffs? Because no one fucking knows what tariffs are. No one understands what they mean or anything like that. And all of a sudden, like you said, Tim, like these certain different like web stores are being like, here's a tariff, here's how a tariff affects you, basically.
And that's like the thing, like obviously it was always going to be passed on to the the consumers that are buying it and the businesses that are importing and all that kind of stuff. But it has been interesting to see how the narrative has changed from these like talking heads from being like, we're going to get tariffs and they're going to pay for them, to now it's like, we're getting tariffs, we're going to pay for them, but in the long game, the bounce back is going to be so sick, and it's just like this continuously, like moving goalpost of like, like I'm sure it's going to be so sick one day, bro. Just trust me, it's going to be so sick. Like when we've all, when we have nothing left, we're all broke. We don't have, like we don't have the basic necessities we need to survive. Then maybe the line will go up. And I think we'll be so back.
One thing about the line and the cult of the line in our fucking sick society, sick like it's fucking awesome society. I love living here.
Yeah, sick as hell
sick as
society.
hell
It's so
society.
sick.
Is that like is I think people need to understand when they see the line go down, right, and therefore there is going to be inflation, or therefore inflation is happening right now as you're seeing it, like that the price of milk never goes down. Like your wage can go up to match it. But that's capitalism. Like it has to go up. This is the basics. It's the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, and like the only way it can recover is by doing more growth, and more people get more money so they can afford the milk again. But like if when you are forced to make like cost saving decisions to get by, like this is logic capitalism is forcing you through to put you like make you do the work of being able to get by on less, because it's not because then it has to give you it has less more to give you to make up the difference, right? Like so everyone just gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and like it's literal when people say that like we just get more and more and more squeezed by this stuff, because it's like every down in the line is cumulative and every up is the norm.
Yeah. And it there is like this run-on effect as well, whereas so a lot of shipping routes are being cancelled. So they're saying they're being cancelled at pandemic level rates. So this is, like these are the actual like these are the ways you can look at it. When you look at the shipping routes and how active they are, you can really kind of see what's coming into a country and where from, and like where the major like the major trade partners and stuff are. So you can see like, oh, okay, Americans are importing a lot of stuff from these areas, blah blah blah, whatever like that. And so what we've seen already in the shift in shipping routes is that so businesses are starting to restructure to exploit cheaper production from like even cheaper countries than before. So then now they're moving to places like the Dominican Republic and stuff. So like, it's like there was already exploited workers at some factory, like somewhere being treated like shit, pumping out little toys for American kids or whatever like that. And now they've lost all their jobs because they've got to go, even though they're not China or whatever like that. They're getting moved. It's getting moved to somewhere even cheaper to produce, and somewhere that will definitely have less worker protections, all these kind of things and stuff. So it's like there's like these other ways that it affects people aside from just like the little tax that you see on the bill or whatever like that. So that's kind of how they maintain their kind of like supply chain resilience in a sense. So which is like, this is the kind of thing that we see cause long-term problems for especially like smaller nations that run their economies based on these kind of markets.
I think like so I'm going to talk about Graeber. So Graeber, everybody drink. Graeber said that like when Marxist theory says we're going for this like ultimate crisis of capitalism and it's going to crash out, like his personal bet on when that like what the direct cause of that in modern economics is like the unpegging of the gold standard, because like there used to be a metric that capital could like interface with the real through, right, which is the gold standard, and the US changed it to basing the dollar off of oil, which like seems like, well, that's a real commodity, but like the price of oil fluctuates. Like it's a market commodity rather than a thing that you can just be like, gold is worth this much, like this much gold is this much, and it's kind of kept in a deliberate like in a store, in a vault, in a like controlled, like we have this supply of gold that we know will be worth this much. Whereas oil like must be used. It's the same as capital. It circulates or it dies. Like, yeah, I mean, I think that like with that in mind, the restructuring of capitalism under neoliberalism, which happened at a very similar time to that change in the basis of the US dollar, like that restructuring is one to just suck up the like all the value from the lowest levels in an irrevocable way, right? Where capitalism normally continually exploits, it's to like drain the last drops from everyone up and up and up until, like, again, only 5 guys own all of the wealth in America. And that's why we're saying this thing about like smaller countries that are imperial suppliers to America will be hit harder, because they are literally down a step from the American working class, because the consumer goods that the American working class consume are imported and, you know, produced by those countries. So those countries will be hit harder, and then the American working class after that, because the value, like the last buck in your pocket to be able to afford eggs, like, is the last drop of value being squeezed out of you, and then you're starving. But that's already happened before that point. Absolutely, to the people who supplied, well, not the eggs, but like, you know, other goods from another country.
Now this is just a little sort of, don't take this too seriously, but there's elements of truth in what I'm going to say. If the fascist US deports every migrant ever, and everyone who ever says anything sort of like slightly critical to El Salvador or Rwanda, and then makes the white American working class do farm work, there will be revolutions everywhere. Because all the based people who are used to like things being really shit and organizing and union stuff will be in these like horrible countries, and they'll just do a revolution there. And then the white American working class will finally realize, damn, this is shit. They lied to us, and now we're having to work on farms. And if we don't work on a farm, we go to El Salvador. No, as I said, I'm being glib, but I think there's something to be said for that, in terms of like, that is what they're sort of saying they're going to do. They're going to get rid, like that. The biggest conundrum for this fascist sort of move now is that they want to deport everyone, just everyone. They just want to deport so many people, and it's like, if you do that, there will just be no food produced internally in America. It simply won't happen. If you look at like, I follow the United Farm Workers on Blue Sky, and it's literally all migrant workers. And I imagine that's the same for most farm work all over the USA. Like, you know, it's very fucking rare that you're gonna, literally the same in the UK. It's very rare you're gonna find like fucking John Farmer in a tractor with a big fucking combine harvester or something on a big field of wheat or whatever. It's like, yeah, sure, you might see a bit of that.
He's the guy who inherited the land, whose dad, like,
exactly. And he employs, well, probably doesn't employ, just like lets them live on the land. It's like modern slavery for all these like migrant workers who he's like exploiting. So yeah, if you're gonna like exploit all these people, like who is doing your farms, bro? And how are you buying food with all these tariffs? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, like, I think they know. I think they do know that mass unrest is coming, and the collapse of their ability to stop mass unrest is coming, and like that is why it reads so much like cashing out and taking like the last drops of wealth and then fucking off somewhere, because like when they've been modeling it as like a climate apocalypse, which like the climate apocalypse is a driver here, but like the billionaire class in America have been talking about bunkers in New Zealand over and over and over again.
Oh,
like
they've been doing that for years. Like they
for such a long time, right? Yeah, you know, they literally have them. And they are, you know, they are real and have real air vents you can find that you could chuck tear gas down. But like the or anything like dookie, whatever, locusts. But the it's not to get away from the climate apocalypse. It's to get away from the worker apocalypse, which is what we call the revolution. Like, it's to get away from angry workers, and like they know it's coming. I think that the authoritarian measures at this point, like, this is utterly vibes-based analysis, what I'm saying right this second, but I do think that it's like keeping a tight grip on the machine that is, as I say, like extracting the very last drops of value up the supply chain for just long enough for it to be done, because you know it's about to explode. And like they're hoping that they are insulated by the police forces and by like their, you know, like fascist militias and so on enough that it won't blow up in their faces. But I'm not confident that they're right about that at all.
I don't think so. Another thing that I did want to touch on as well is that you know, El Salvador with this giant prison complex, and other nations that are already planning on following suit, like Costa Rica have begun plans for their own, modeled after the El Salvadorian model. these are places like they're already doing prison labor there and looking at upscaling their operations and all those kind of things. This is a way that shitty right-wing leaders in these small nations will try to try to turn things around. They'll try to be like, okay, well, our economy is fucked from this, but if we do this, if we import prisoners, if we get them producing stuff, if we get them manufacturing, this is our ticket out of there. And it lines up with all like the tough on crime stuff and all that kind of stuff. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the same way that even in the past, like in the Pacific, we've had like Nauru and like other islands being used as, like little Guantanamo Bay style areas for, for Australia and New Zealand and all that. I think we're going to see them turned into, like proper like prison labor, like, manufacturing places, manufacturing plants for various goods. And I think that, like, I feel like that's just, like that's the tone that they're setting for the next for the next decade or so. I think that's going to be a conversation that we're going to hear a lot more about. Even, like there's even down here in like mainland New Zealand, the government are trying to build a mega prison that has similar facilities. It's I think it's going to be a thing. I think that's a conversation that we're going to see popping up a lot more on Red Planet in the future.
Yeah, if you want a fucking a vision of the future, check out the Stuart Gordon film Fortress.
Or like the video game I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Yeah,
or
it's that, but you're
keep
just
watching
in like a Matrix.
Or keep watching Red Planet, because we've been right about everything so far, and I think we'll keep on being right about it. I think that I'll say this, like, given what we were just saying, and maybe this is ending everything on quite a glib note, but like practically we're gonna have to get more and more serious about prisoner support in all leftist movements starting right away. But just because the leftist movement, like we've been talking about this since the beginning, that it's going to turn to like more authoritarian policing, then people are going to do more extreme actions, and then the policing is going to in turn be more extreme to that. And so we just are seeing loads of people who are trying to do what is obviously right, like Palestine Action, like stopping machinery being made to kill children with, and then they're getting jail sentences, like a bunch of it's just going to be a thing we're going to have to be focusing on, and more and more, and
I mean, like we even just talking about the Just Stop Oil stuff, and even like last week I was talking about the activists down here that like were like in breach of conditions and all this kind of stuff. Like this over policing of activists is definitely like part of this pipeline, right?
Yeah, that's the key message to take away. Keep organizing. Try, and make sure, I guess, as well, that your organizations understand, or the people that you're organizing with, that we can no longer demand perfectionist, convenience-based politics. Like we are on the precipice of something horrific. Not even really in the precipice, like a lot of people are already descending into the abyss. And petty arguments, disagreements, these have all got to come second, unfortunately, to like actual work.
I think a lot of people are going to be getting more militant for sure. It's kind of it's part of why I've cast doubt on the DDPF thing in France, like about they're trying to say it's just organized crime, this is just gangs, and I'm like, maybe gangs are actually involved in some way, but it does seem like they actually mean it when they say fuck prisons, like
Yeah, 100%. And maybe that's the way that most of the revolutionary activity is going to take place. It's going to be more kind of like anonymous affinity groups, or maybe less anonymous affinity groups who leave a calling card, and that kind of a thing. It's it's a very sort of like uncertain time, but one thing can be certain, and that is that revolution will just happen. The more and more that they keep squeezing the crank, as you say. So
two things can be certain: one is that they're cranking it, and two is that the Pope is dead.
Yes, right.
So that's the show.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. I thought that was great. Great work, everyone. I'm gonna tell you now about our money receiving facilities for you to give us money from, so that you can get more shows like this because they're so good. Conrad is currently having a nightmare listening to me say this. Go to patreon.com/red_planet. There are loads of different tiers that you could choose from, but at the end of every show, we thank a very specific tier. It's the highest paid tier. It's our sickos. Thank you so much, Risk Inverse, for being our sicko. You're a crazy sicko. You're amazing. Oh, we love you. Thank you so much for supporting our show so much and continuing to do so for so long. You can also check out our merch, mercenarycreative.com. Go and get one of our tote bags, one of our hoodies, one of our t-shirts, and we got more designs coming soon. And don't forget to support the hosts as well. Sophie, where can we find more Sophie?
You can go to linktra.ee/Sophie from Mars. All my links are there. I have been publishing more and more stuff on Substack because my main thing is I make video essays. If you don't know my YouTube channel, Sophie from Mars, I make video essays. They're really fucking good. You should watch them. You should also go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars and subscribe there. But video essays are slow as hell to make. They're big, complicated projects. That said, it's a great time to be on my Patreon because I am going to be finishing two quite massive projects I've been working on for a long time soon. So there will be stuff available early as that's happening in the next few months. It's also a great time to support me on Patreon because it's how I pay my rent and my bills and afford food. So I really would appreciate that because it has been going down while I've not been releasing new videos, and that's really stressful. So please do help me out if you can. But in the meantime, as I said, video essays are slow to make, and I've been publishing stuff on Substack. So please also check out my Substack. I put up a new piece, as I mentioned earlier, about Just Stop Oil today. Mule, where can people find more of you?
You can find me at linktree.ee/DJMUEL. I will be coming back to making videos very soon. I've got a couple in the pipeline that are pretty much done in terms of being written. They just need to be filmed. I just kind of need to like get a job and sort out my universal credit before that. If you want to help me not get in debt loads, you can go to my Patreon and give me some money. That would be great. Or also just make a one-off donation to my PayPal. That would be very, very helpful. But yeah, I will be making some more content soon. And I will probably be streaming some video games before I get back to that. Probably less politics stuff, just because, as I said at the start of the show, I've been fucking burnt out for a while, and I just kind of want to relax and heal for a bit. But yeah, that's me. Tim, how about you?
You can find me on Twitch and YouTube as Conquest of Dread. Not that I'm on stream that much anymore, aside from Red Planet. I haven't actually done like a separate stream in a long time. But it is not completely off the agenda. I do want to get back to it one day. Or you can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter as Dread Conquest. And if you are into tabletop RPGs, check out Dark RPG 2000 on Twitter. It's a little project that is like so close to being wrapped up. If you're into that kind of stuff. But otherwise, you can just catch me here next week. Cool. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next week. This has been Red Planet. Goodbye. Cool.
Cool.
That was a really neat sign off, Tim. That's